Today is anniversary, which marks the 4th anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, a war that began in 2014 with the seizure of Crimea and has since become one of the defining geopolitical conflicts of our time. And this was the announcement from Russian leader Vladimir Putin in 2022 announcing the invasion of Ukraine.
I decided to conduct a special military operation. Its goal is the protection of the people who, for 8 years, suffered from abuse and genocide from the Kiev regime.
Over the weekend, Ukraine again faced waves of drone and missile attacks, while European foreign ministers meeting in Brussels are struggling at the moment to agree a new sanctions package. US broker talks in Geneva have stalled and questions remain about what happens next. Meanwhile, cabinet ministers are convening ahead of a special meeting of European leaders to mark 4 years since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The Taoiseach Micheál Martin's expected to commit to advancing Ukraine's EU membership when Ireland holds the EU presidency later this year, while Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will address the world later on today via video link with the European Parliament. So to discuss the global political picture and the local impact here, we are joined by Professor Donnacha Beachain of Dublin City University, of course a native of Newmarket-on-Fergus, an expert in post-Soviet politics. Donnacha, thanks very much for being with us. The war itself, 4th anniversary today, it's been described as a grinding high casualty stalemate. If you look at the numbers who've died in terms of soldiers, over 1 million Russian casualties, 1.2 million. Ukrainian losses are estimated at roughly half that number. How do you assess where we're at on this 4th anniversary and the current strategic balance?
Well, good morning, Alan. It is a very grim anniversary. As you say, so many people have died. It's estimated 1.2 million casualties on the Russian side, about a third of that on the Ukrainian side, with no end in sight. And, even the sight of his own compatriots dying hasn't moved Vladimir Putin 1 inch from his imperial project, his genocidal imperial project in Ukraine. So we are, unfortunately, at a grinding stalemate. It is, I guess, a half full, half empty situation. You there quoted Vladimir Putin 4 years ago announcing his special military operation. He thought he would decapitate Ukraine within days, and all the embassies, vacated Kyiv in anticipation of that, including the Irish one. And 4 years later, Ukraine is still standing. Most of Ukraine is still in Ukrainian hands. So Vladimir Putin has not been able to achieve his objectives, but Ukrainians haven't also been able to push Russia out of Ukraine. So that's why it's a stalemate. The big change, of course, in the last year has been the advent of Donald Trump's second presidency. The Americans have effectively switched sides during the year. And that's one of the reasons why this last year we've seen the greatest number of Ukrainian civilians killed, more than at any other time in the war, simply because they don't have the means to defend themselves in terms of their air defense system, because every night there are hundreds and thousands of drones and decoys and missiles which are aimed at Ukrainian apartment blocks, energy infrastructure. A small percentage of those get through, and those are the ones that are lethal.
Over the weekend, we saw further attacks on Ukrainian cities, and militarily and politically, Donnacha, what is Moscow trying to achieve at this stage of the war? And you mentioned a moment ago Vladimir Putin hasn't achieved his objectives. Do you mean all or any? Has Russia, in your view, achieved any of its strategic objectives since the beginning of the war?
No, it hasn't. Not its strategic objectives, because its strategic objective was to end Ukraine as a sovereign independent state, to install a puppet regime in Kyiv, and of course to acquire, parts of Ukraine which it no longer is able to acquire. And that's one of the reasons, by the way, that Donald Trump has given a lifeline to Vladimir Putin, because this whole negotiation process, so-called, is really about handing over to Russia lands and people that it hasn't been able to conquer militarily since 2014, so over a 12-year period. And that's where the process has stalled, really. But I mean, it's difficult really to communicate, I think, the human costs that Ukraine is undergoing. I mean, Ukraine was and is a plentiful country. It's a rich country agriculturally. It had more than 50 million people when the Soviet Union collapsed, which is just 35 years ago. Now the population is in the late 20-somethings. It's not just because of war, of course, the refugees, and of course many of them are living in Clare, but also the demographic crisis. I mean, people are unable to have children. They're postponing their families for indefinitely, and that's having a huge impact psychologically and culturally on the Ukrainian people. So I think that when we get into the statistical aspects of how much has been lost and how much territory has swapped sides in the last year, it's never. I think it's important never to lose sight of that human dimension, which is at the core of what's happening in Ukraine.
In terms of Europe and sanctions, we see struggles up to now on a 20th sanctions package against Moscow from the EU. Hungary, I suppose rather predictably, trying to block it. Minister of State for European Affairs Thomas Byrne says he believes the EU will ultimately sign off on it. Do you think it will ultimately come through? And what effect will a 20th sanctions package have on Moscow, given it's the 20th one and yet the war still continues? How damaging are these sanctions packages to Putin?
Well, these sanctions were never going to be game changers. What they're there to do is to discommode the Russian economy. The Russian economy is under stress. They're spending 40% of their economy on the war. That's not a sustainable contribution, and it is beginning to bite in Russia. I think more importantly, what Hungary's managed to do is to stall the 90 billion loan from being implemented that was agreed. The reasons for that, by the way, a Russian missile attack has put out of action the energy supply of Russian energy to Hungary through Ukraine, which the Ukrainians still allowed to go through. And the Hungarians are arguing that the Ukrainians haven't been able to fix the damage quickly enough, and they're saying they're taking too long. And as a punishment for this, even though, as I said, it was a Russian attack that caused this energy crisis for Hungary, Ukraine is the one again that is the victim. But that therein lies a big problem within Europe. Of course, we have our own mini Trumps, mini Putins, those who are allied to authoritarians elsewhere, and EU, as we know well, works on consensus, and that's been to the detriment of Ukraine, of course, because it means that the Europeans haven't been able to get aid quickly enough and effectively enough to Ukraine over the last couple of years.
So we're 4 years in now, entering the 5th year. Donnacha, when we've spoken to you about this before, we've spoken about the possibility of this war rumbling on for years and years because we've seen incremental gains and retreats on both sides at various points. How close to the end of the war do you think we are? Is it going to rumble on for some time yet? And what would a durable peace realistically look like, given, as you mentioned earlier, it feels as if the US has switched sides on this, and Donald Trump seems more minded to broker a peace deal in which Russia would retain the Ukrainian territory it currently holds, which won't wash with Volodymyr Zelensky or indeed his people.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. How long the war could go on for? I mean, it increasingly looks something like the Vietnam War of the 1960s, where again you had this kind of imperial desire to impose a foreign will on a people, and as you know, that went on for more than a decade. But ultimately, despite the fact that it was against a much more powerful country, a nuclear armed country, the Vietnamese ultimately repelled the Americans because they created consequences that the Americans ultimately weren't able to bear. And I think that's the key for Ukraine and for its supporters, is to create consequences for Russia that are unsustainable in the long term, and to make it reevaluate its intention to subordinate and dominate Ukraine. Things can happen very quickly, of course, in a dictatorship. I mean, I'm old enough to have been in East Germany in 1989, and I remember how, meeting the communist leaders there, they were so sure that their dictatorship would last indefinitely, and then a few months later it all came tumbling down. That's the nature of dictatorships. They're not stable. And similarly, people hope that Russia will collapse because of its own contradictions at some point in the future, and that again will only occur a result of pressure. Nothing speeds along a dictatorship's collapse and defeat in war. That's indeed what happened to the Argentinians, you remember, in 1982. In terms of a durable peace, I think what Ukrainians are looking for is they're looking for, of course, a sovereign, independent Ukraine, and they're also looking for security guarantees because, they have been burnt before. And we've mentioned this many times that there have been security guarantees before which have guaranteed that Ukrainians would be protected from Russian invasion, and they've never been honored. So at the moment, they're willing to freeze the conflict at its current line of contact and then have negotiations. That's a big compromise for Ukrainians because, of course, they'd like to get their territory back so that people can move back there. People have even had to move their graves, the graves of their relatives, to safer areas because they want to be able to visit them in the future. And if they're under Russian occupation, they can't. But they're willing to freeze the line of contact for the greater good and hope to get back the rest of it later. But Russia, this is the key stumbling block. Russia refuses to agree to a ceasefire. I mean, now it's been a year since Donald Trump first asked for that ceasefire. Ukraine has persistently said yes. Russia has said no. And until Russia, unfortunately, is pressured into a situation where it's in its interests to agree to a ceasefire, we unfortunately are going to look at more grinding warfare ahead, unfortunately.
Just before I let you go, Donnacha, can I ask you about that point you were making a moment ago about dictatorships not lasting forever? And I take the point you were making about East Germany in 1989. No one foresaw the Berlin Wall falling. It seemed to all happen so quickly. But from the outside looking in at this current moment in time, Vladimir Putin's grip on power in Russia looks as ironclad as it ever has been. Do you see any signs, any potential in the near or medium term of any opposition to his power, or does it look like he will be there for some time to come, which itself, I guess, would mean the war is going to continue as long as he's there?
Well, I've lived in dictatorships, and you never know what comes after the dictator until it actually happens. So we can't predict the future, but what we can do is gain some knowledge from past events. And if you look back just the summer of 2023, when Yevgeny Prigozhin, the leader of Wagner, marched 800 kilometers towards Moscow without a fight. He took Rostov-on-Don, one of the largest cities in Russia and head of the Russian operations in Ukraine. He took that city without a fight. So the regime is where it's a bully in terms of its neighbors, its smaller neighbors. It's a rather fragile system, and it's one that relies on coercion. And once the perception, as I said, that it doesn't have a monopoly of force anymore is dissipated, then I think you have a situation where dictatorship is vulnerable. So how it ends, we don't know. But I think it like that dictatorships that we had in Eastern Europe behind the Iron Curtain, I think that it is unsustainable in the long term.
Okay, Donnacha, thank you very much for being with us this morning. Professor Donnacha Beachain there joining us on the show. For more on this, I'm joined in studio by Mariya Nikishanova, originally, of course, from Irpin in Ukraine and who's been living here in Ennis for over a decade. Mariya, good morning to you.
Good morning.
This fourth anniversary, what kind of emotions or does it trigger for you personally?
Yeah, really a lot of emotions, to be honest, not nice ones, of course. This year, I mean, what's interesting that everybody running trend, I don't know how it's called, but in social media, people posting what they were saying, what they were writing at the very first day 4 years ago, right? How it's, was accepted by people, how they were, frightened, what they were saying to each other, right? Many, many things. So that's absolutely, a lot of emotions, not nice ones. Again, so many people died in Ukraine, right? So we need to remember those. We need to be grateful to the lives of soldiers which protected Ukraine, and we have Ukraine as it is, as a country, right, as a sovereign country, and so much territory still with Ukraine, right? So we need to be grateful to that. And in Ukraine at 9 a.m. each morning there is a minute of remembrance and silence when people remember those who died. So yeah, a lot of emotions, not nice ones. And much less hope this time.
And I know when you are with us to talk about what's happening in Ukraine, I always ask you what friends and family members who are still living there are telling you about how things are, and this seems as pertinent a time or as apt a time as any to ask that question again. I mean, on the fourth anniversary, what have you been hearing from them recently? What are they telling you about daily life? Do they have any expectation of this war ending soon, or do they see it just continuing for years to come?
Very awful situation now in Ukraine, right? So for for years, right? And this winter, more specifically, Russia is bombing electricity plants, energy supplies, whatever Ukraine has to support like normal life, right? And that's, the conditions people live in are horrible. Okay, so definitely people are not happy at all. This winter also was cold, very cold. It's also not helping, right? So it's very hard to live in Ukraine now, and that's true because you need to maintain the daily life, right? And moreover, each Ukrainian is trying to get some amount of money to donate to army, to drones, to everything which actually protects ourselves. But you need to get that money somewhere. You need to go to work. So, it's not helping for the looking into the future with the optimism when there is country hungry, which stops the money which is supposed to come and just give people, something to survive.
There seems to be confidence, or certainly, as I mentioned earlier on, Minister Byrne feels that ultimately the EU will agree that sanctions package, but it is the 20th sanctions package, and yet here we are, the war still continuing. Do you welcome the sanctions packages, or do you feel it makes no difference?
I welcome sanctions part. You need to do what you can do. If you don't do anything, that means you accept it. If you accept it, then tomorrow you will be in the same position. So definitely, I think it's not more for Ukraine, it's more for Europe.
But are you concerned that, does Putin, it's designed to hamper the Russian economy, but is Putin playing the long game here of saying, well, whatever the EU does, I now have, it feels as if I have the US in my corner. As Donnacha mentioned earlier on, it feels as if the US has switched sides, and that's the ace up his sleeve, that when all is said and done, when any sort of deal, if and when any sort of deal is hammered out, he has the weight of the US administration in his corner, and he believes that will help him get, at the very least, retain the percentage of Ukrainian territory that Russia currently holds.
Definitely that Trump helped Putin to run the war whole last year. If Trump were not there, maybe war would be finished by now. And he's giving, more confidence to Putin that he can continue. That's absolute true. But changing sides fully for Trump, I'm not really sure that will really happen. I don't think, I hope maybe, I don't know, but I don't think that American people will let Trump to do that, right? To be all fully on the side of Putin, right? So just fighting with him. And, also in terms of the deal which they are trying to make Ukraine to make, the real thing, which is the reality, what they want to do is impossible. It's just impossible. They cannot make Ukrainians to accept capitulation at this point of time. And even Trump, even though he's playing, I'm the big boss here, he doesn't have the means to make Ukraine to sign it. And okay, what he can do, really, what he can do? Okay, he can stop the provision of the information. It will not stop the war. He can, he already do not supply any weapons to Ukraine, zero.
It has harmed, obviously, Ukraine's efforts to defend itself. But yeah, as you say, Ukraine continues. But do you worry that over a longer period of time, that lack of US support will begin to rear its head in a bigger manner than it currently is?
Yeah, but it is already, the supplies of the missiles, which helps to cut the drones and air defense, missiles. They're already in the shortage. They already, Russia has possibility and had possibility to bomb our energy because we didn't have enough protection and we didn't have enough protection for the. Okay, so for putting the rockets down, so we just didn't have those things which supplied by US, and it's already helped Russia to make what we have now in Ukraine. So, okay, they can stop it fully. They can stop selling what they are doing now, weapons to European Union. But then, okay, what kind of a partner US is for the whole wars? If you are having the contract, you are selling the weapons, and apparently because you just decide you don't, you stop it. I mean, it will be damage for US first of all. So I don't think Trump will go that way. If he goes that way, then I mean, I don't think that the whole economy of US will be in good state.
I just want to ask you about the story people are hearing in our news bulletins this morning. Mariya, new CSO figures suggesting around 3,000 Ukrainians may still be living in Clare. Just over 60% of those Ukrainians in this county have had recent activity in administrative data, the likes of welfare payments, since the end of November. From your experience in Ennis and Clare in general, how, if at all, has the Ukrainian community changed over the past 4 years? Have you noticed a drop at all in the number of Ukrainians here? Have people returned home? Are they moving elsewhere?
There is a lot of changes, but overall I feel the drop. I definitely see less people are here, many moving to the different counties. Right.
So it's not all about them returning to Ukraine. They might be going elsewhere.
No. I mean, there are some people who are returning. There are people who are moving to other countries, right? So that's also a case. But, I don't think that a big percentage, but people moving around, and overall, I think it's less in Clare. And I think the key reason for that is the accommodation. It's much more offers in other counties, right? Closer to Dublin, more options. So definitely people moving where they can get accommodation. And since, the hotels and some kind of this temporary accommodations which were provisioned by government, they were closed pretty much. I don't think we have left with few of those. All people who were there, they moved somewhere, right? So not in Clare.
Of those who are still here, do you feel they have integrated well into life in Clare, Mariya? And have we, the Irish people, Clare people here, helped in that integration process?
Well, those who are staying, and it's really big percentage, I would say, working, doing business, opening businesses. I'm really happy to see that. And I think also Clare people noticing the businesses which are opened by Ukrainians. So, I mean, I think, integration is going very, very well. I mean, even, my favorite school, Holy Family, we have Ukrainian kids and, doing very well, in studies as well, right? So I think that's really great. And, as usual, I need to admit, right? And that's true. And also in school, the help of community, the help of teachers, the help of everyone to get welcomed, to get, confident, to feel good. That's, cannot be underappreciated. Absolutely.
At the risk of ending on a glass half empty note, how do you feel about the war? Do you think we're closer to the end of it than at a midway point, or do you think we'll be here in a year's time talking about the 5th anniversary of the war with very little having changed?
Well, hopes are hopes, right? But if we will be in a situation like today, Ukraine will be fight anyway, so we'll be having 5th and 6th and 7th anniversary. And I mean, situation like this, that Europe again very much afraid to do anything. Let's be very, very fair, unfortunately. So, and in situation when Trump doing his crazy things, we will have, again, more anniversaries, unfortunately, but Ukraine will not stop. We cannot, there is no choice for us not to continue. If we don't continue, I would like everyone to understand that we will die. Ukraine will not exist. If we will sign the deal, which is currently proposed, just give up the territory, Ukraine will not exist. The war will continue. The war, okay, maybe it will be few months stop, maybe 1 year, and then it will be renewed. It's just...
You believe that'll be opening a door that Putin would just kick fully open? Give him an inch, he'll take a mile.
Of course, yeah.
We do have to leave it there. Mariya Nikishanova, always a pleasure to have you in. Thank you very much for being with us.
Just one thing I would like to add. This Saturday, for the 4th anniversary, we are having protest in the town centre in Ennis. I welcome everyone. So, we again...
What time?
At 1 p.m. Okay, and the title for it is Support Ukraine, Protect Europe. So exactly, the Ukraine is protecting Europe at the moment.
Okay, 1 o'clock this Saturday. Mariya, thank you very much
Thank
for
you
being with
very
us
much.
on Morning Focus.